There's a monetary pattern that has destroyed every great empire in history. And right now, in 2025, the United States is following that exact same script, step by step. In ancient Rome, the denarius started as pure silver. By 265 AD, it contained 0.5% silver. The empire collapsed within decades. In 1931, Britain abandoned the gold standard on September 20th. The empire crumbled within 40 years. In 1971, Nixon ended dollar-gold convertibility on August 15th. America began its descent from creditor nation to the world's largest debtor. 3 empires. 3 times they lost their gold. 3 times ordinary people paid the price through hidden inflation and wealth extraction. And here's what should terrify you. Central banks worldwide are now buying gold at record levels, over 1,000 tons annually, while the derivatives market has exploded to $600 trillion in notional value. The United States today holds the same gold reserves it held 50 years ago, while every other major power is quietly stockpiling. History doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme, and America is singing the final verse. Subscribe, because when this monetary reset hits, you'll want to understand exactly how they rigged the game and what comes next. What happened to the gold reserves of the great empires was not accidental, and the pattern is repeating with the United States positioned as the next victim in this centuries-old cycle of monetary manipulation and wealth extraction. The systematic removal of sound money backing represents one of history's most effective mechanisms for transferring wealth from ordinary citizens to financial elites. And this process has destroyed every major empire that attempted it. The evidence spans over 2 millennia and reveals a consistent blueprint that governments and central banks have employed whenever they face fiscal pressure or desire expanded control over their monetary systems. The Roman Empire provides the earliest documented example of this deliberate monetary debasement. Around 211 BC, the Roman denarius contained approximately 3.9 grams of fine silver, establishing it as a reliable store of value and medium of exchange throughout the Mediterranean world. This silver-backed currency formed the foundation of Roman commerce and enabled the empire's economic expansion across multiple continents. However, successive emperors discovered that reducing the silver content of coins provided immediate funding for military campaigns, public works projects, and social programs without the political burden of raising taxes directly. Under Emperor Nero in the mid-1st century, the silver content dropped to approximately 3.18 grams, with purity falling to 93.5%. The debasement accelerated dramatically through the 2nd and 3rd centuries as emperors faced increasing fiscal pressures from barbarian invasions, internal conflicts, and an expanding bureaucratic state. By 265 AD, the denarius contained merely 0.5% silver, effectively transforming what had been real money into worthless tokens. The government used the proceeds from this hidden taxation to finance ambitious public expenditures, while ordinary Romans experienced devastating inflation that destroyed their purchasing power and accumulated savings. The United Kingdom's departure from the gold standard in 1931 demonstrates how this same pattern operates in modern times. After World War I, Britain attempted to restore the pre-war gold parity in 1925, but this decision proved economically devastating as it overvalued sterling and created deflationary pressures throughout the economy. During the Great Depression, maintaining gold convertibility became impossible as foreign creditors demanded gold in exchange for pounds, creating massive outflows that threatened the Bank of England's reserves. On September 19, 1931, the British government officially abandoned the gold standard and suspended convertibility, marking the end of Britain's role as the world's monetary anchor. This decision allowed immediate devaluation of the pound, providing temporary relief for British exports, while simultaneously imposing hidden costs on savers and fixed income holders, whose purchasing power deteriorated overnight. The United States completed this historical trilogy on August 15, 1971, when President Nixon announced the suspension of dollar-gold convertibility in what became known as the Nixon shock. Under the Bretton Woods system, established after World War II, the dollar had been pegged to gold at $35 per ounce, while other currencies maintained fixed exchange rates with the dollar. Rising budget deficits from Great Society programs and the Vietnam War created mounting pressure on American gold reserves, as foreign governments increasingly demanded gold in exchange for their dollar holdings. Nixon's decision ended official gold backing for the world's reserve currency, ushering in the era of pure fiat money, where monetary authorities possessed unlimited discretion to expand credit and currency supplies without any tangible constraints. The common thread connecting these three empires reveals that gold represents far more than mere metal in monetary systems. Gold serves as the anchor that prevents unlimited monetary expansion and protects ordinary citizens from hidden wealth confiscation through currency debasement. When this anchor disappears, the system becomes vulnerable to manipulation, inflation, and systematic wealth extraction that benefits those who control the monetary apparatus, while devastating those who hold savings in the debased currency. The Roman Empire's systematic destruction of its monetary system reveals the precise mechanics through which governments extract wealth from their citizens while maintaining the illusion of economic stability. During the transition from republic to empire, the silver denarius served as the unshakable foundation of Roman commerce, enabling trade across vast territories and providing citizens with a reliable store of value that maintained purchasing power across generations. The deliberate degradation of this monetary anchor represents one of history's most comprehensive examples of state-sponsored wealth confiscation disguised as fiscal policy. The original denarius, introduced around 211 BC, contained approximately 3.9 grams of fine silver and established Rome as the monetary standard for the civilized world. This silver-backed currency enabled merchants to conduct business from Britain to Egypt with complete confidence in the money's intrinsic value. Citizens understood that their savings possessed real purchasing power because the coins contained actual precious metal, not merely government promises. The denarius became synonymous with Roman economic might and provided the monetary foundation for the empire's unprecedented expansion and prosperity. However, successive emperors discovered that reducing the silver content of coins provided immediate access to vast sums without the political risks associated with direct taxation. Under Emperor Nero, during the mid-1st century, the silver content dropped to approximately 3.18 grams, while purity fell to 93.5%, representing the beginning of systematic monetary debasement. The government melted down existing coins, extracted precious metal, and reissued the same number of coins with less silver content. This process generated enormous profits for the imperial treasury, while creating the illusion that citizens still possessed the same amount of money. The extracted silver funded military campaigns, gladiatorial games, and massive construction projects that enhanced imperial prestige, while ordinary Romans unknowingly paid for these expenditures through the hidden tax of monetary debasement. The debasement accelerated dramatically during the 2nd and 3rd centuries, as emperors faced mounting fiscal pressures from barbarian invasions, civil wars, and an expanding bureaucratic apparatus. Each successive ruler discovered that further reducing silver content provided immediate relief from budget constraints, while postponing the economic consequences until after their reign. By 265 AD, the denarius contained merely 0.5% silver, transforming what had been sound money into worthless tokens backed only by imperial decree. The government had effectively stolen 99.5% of the currency's intrinsic value while maintaining the fiction that citizens possessed the same monetary wealth. The consequences of this systematic theft manifested as devastating inflation that destroyed the purchasing power of ordinary Romans while enriching those closest to the monetary creation process. Prices increased exponentially as merchants recognized that coins no longer contained real value, forcing citizens to carry increasingly large quantities of debased currency to purchase basic necessities. The government's ability to create unlimited quantities of worthless coins enabled massive wealth transfers from savers and fixed-income citizens to the imperial court and its favored constituencies. Military commanders, government contractors, and imperial administrators benefited from receiving newly minted coins at face value, while ordinary citizens suffered the consequences of currency depreciation. Confidence in Roman currency collapsed as citizens and foreign trading partners recognized the systematic fraud underlying the monetary system. The empire's fiscal burden grew exponentially as the government required ever-increasing quantities of debased currency to finance the same level of expenditures. The monetary system weakened the entire economic foundation of Roman society, disrupting trade relationships, destroying savings, and undermining the economic incentives that had enabled the empire's rise to dominance. This monetary destruction contributed directly to Rome's economic decline and ultimate collapse, demonstrating how the removal of sound money backing inevitably leads to systemic failure and the transfer of wealth from ordinary citizens to those who control the monetary apparatus. Britain's abandonment of the gold standard in 1931 represents the modern manifestation of the same wealth extraction mechanism that destroyed Rome, demonstrating how 20th century governments employed sophisticated financial engineering to accomplish what ancient emperors achieved through crude coin clipping. The British experience reveals how central banks and treasury officials deliberately chose policies that appeared economically necessary, while systematically transferring wealth from ordinary savers to financial institutions and government coffers through carefully orchestrated currency manipulation. Following World War I, Britain faced enormous war debts and a dramatically altered global economic landscape. Yet the financial establishment insisted on restoring the pre-war gold parity in 1925. This decision, championed by Chancellor Winston Churchill and the Bank of England, pegged the pound at $4.86 per ounce of gold, the same rate that existed before the war. However, this parity significantly overvalued sterling relative to Britain's weakened post-war economic position, creating immediate deflationary pressures throughout the domestic economy. British exports became prohibitively expensive in international markets, while imports flooded the country at artificially cheap prices, devastating domestic manufacturing and creating massive unemployment. The gold standard restoration benefited London's financial district and international banking interests, while imposing severe economic hardship on ordinary British workers and manufacturers who suffered from the overvalued currency. The Great Depression intensified these structural problems as global trade collapsed, and foreign creditors increasingly demanded gold in exchange for their sterling holdings. The Bank of England faced mounting pressure as gold reserves drained from the country while maintaining the fixed exchange rate became economically impossible. Foreign governments and private investors recognized that Britain could not indefinitely support an overvalued currency and began converting their pound holdings into gold at the official rate, creating a classic bank run on the nation's monetary reserves. The financial establishment faced a choice between defending the gold standard and preserving domestic economic stability, and they chose the path that would provide maximum flexibility for monetary manipulation. On September 20th, 1931, the British Treasury announced the suspension of gold convertibility and the abandonment of the gold standard, marking a decisive turning point in global monetary history. This decision immediately freed the Bank of England from the constraints of gold backing and enabled unlimited expansion of credit and currency supplies. The pound devalued rapidly against gold and other currencies, providing temporary competitive advantages for British exports, while simultaneously imposing hidden costs on every holder of sterling-denominated assets. British savers discovered that their bank accounts, insurance policies, and fixed income investments had lost substantial purchasing power overnight through no fault of their own, while those with access to hard assets or foreign currencies escaped the worst effects of the devaluation. The mechanics of this wealth transfer operated through the same fundamental process that destroyed Roman currency, albeit with greater sophistication and propaganda cover. The government and central bank created the appearance of economic necessity, while deliberately choosing policies that benefited financial institutions at the expense of ordinary citizens. Banks and large corporations with international operations could hedge their currency exposure and profit from the volatility, while pensioners, small savers, and wage earners bore the full cost of the monetary manipulation. The financial press presented the decision as unavoidable economic reality rather than a deliberate choice to prioritize the interests of the banking system over the savings of ordinary Britons. This monetary abandonment accelerated Britain's decline from global financial dominance and demonstrated how the removal of sound money backing inevitably leads to systematic wealth extraction and economic instability. The decision marked the effective end of Britain's role as the world's monetary anchor and accelerated the shift toward pure fiat currencies that would characterize the remainder of the 20th century. The British experience proved that modern governments possessed far more sophisticated tools for accomplishing the same wealth confiscation that ancient empires achieved through crude debasement, but the fundamental mechanism remained identical. The United States completed the historical trilogy of monetary abandonment on August 15, 1971. When President Nixon announced the suspension of dollar-gold convertibility in what became known as the Nixon Shock, representing the most consequential monetary decision in modern history and the final severing of the world's reserve currency from any tangible backing. This decisive moment transformed the global financial system and enabled unprecedented levels of monetary manipulation that continue to extract wealth from ordinary savers while enriching those who control the levers of credit creation and currency expansion. Under the Bretton Woods system established after World War II, the United States had assumed the role of global monetary anchor by pegging the dollar to gold at $35 per ounce, while other major currencies maintained fixed exchange rates with the dollar. This arrangement positioned America as the world's central bank, with foreign governments and central banks holding dollars as reserves while maintaining the theoretical ability to convert those dollars into gold at the official rate. The system provided international monetary stability, while granting the United States enormous privileges, including the ability to finance domestic programs and foreign military operations by simply printing dollars that other nations willingly accepted as payment. However, the Johnson and Nixon administrations discovered that maintaining gold convertibility imposed unwelcome constraints on their ambitious domestic and foreign policy agendas. The Great Society programs, combined with escalating expenditures for the Vietnam War, created mounting budget deficits that required increasing monetary expansion to finance. Foreign governments, particularly France under Charles de Gaulle, recognized that America was printing excessive quantities of dollars relative to its gold reserves and began demanding gold in exchange for their dollar holdings. This created a classic run on the American monetary system, as foreign creditors realized that the United States could not indefinitely honor its gold convertibility promises, while simultaneously expanding the money supply to fund massive government expenditures. Nixon's August 15th announcement included wage and price controls, a 10% import surcharge, and most significantly, the suspension of dollar-gold convertibility, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system and ushering in the era of pure fiat currency. The decision appeared to address immediate balance of payments problems while actually removing the ECB's final constraint on American monetary expansion. With gold convertibility eliminated, the Federal Reserve and Treasury gained unlimited discretion to expand credit and currency supplies without any tangible backing or external limits. The Nixon administration presented this decision as temporary emergency measures, but the gold window never reopened, and the world entered a new monetary era characterized by floating exchange rates and unlimited fiat currency creation. The consequences of this monetary revolution extended far beyond immediate exchange rate adjustments and created the foundation for systematic wealth extraction that continues today. Once the dollar became pure fiat currency, its value depended entirely on policy decisions and market perceptions rather than tangible backing, enabling monetary authorities to manipulate currency values for political and economic objectives. American savers and fixed income holders began facing the persistent threat of currency debasement as the government gained the ability to finance expenditures through monetary expansion rather than direct taxation. The removal of gold backing eliminated the automatic adjustment mechanism that had previously constrained excessive government spending and monetary creation. This transformation benefited financial institutions and government entities with access to newly created credit, while systematically disadvantaging ordinary citizens whose savings and wages eroded through hidden inflation. Banks and large corporations could borrow at artificially suppressed interest rates and invest in appreciating assets, while workers and savers discovered that their purchasing power declined despite apparent economic growth. The Nixon shock demonstrated how modern governments could accomplish the same wealth extraction achieved by Roman emperors and British officials, but with greater sophistication and propaganda cover that obscured the systematic nature of the wealth transfer from ordinary Americans to those who controlled the monetary system. The present monetary landscape reveals the identical pattern that destroyed Rome, Britain, and initiated America's decline, but with exponentially greater scale and sophistication that positions the United States as the next victim in this recurring cycle of wealth extraction and systemic collapse. The mechanisms operating today demonstrate how financial elites have refined the ancient practice of monetary manipulation into a comprehensive system that systematically transfers wealth from ordinary citizens to those who control the levers of credit creation, derivatives trading, and central bank policy. Central banks worldwide are engaging in unprecedented gold accumulation that signals fundamental loss of confidence in the current reserve currency system, with official purchases exceeding 1,000 tons annually since 2022. This massive coordinated buying represents the largest shift in central bank reserves since the 1970s and indicates that monetary authorities recognize the approaching end of the dollar-dominated system. China, Russia, India, and other major economies are quietly stockpiling gold while reducing their dollar holdings, creating the same dynamic that pressured Britain before 1931 and America before 1971. The public rarely receives explicit information about these strategic moves, but the data reveals a deliberate preparation for monetary system transition that will devastate unprepared American savers. The derivatives market has exploded to over $600 trillion in notional value, representing a hidden web of leverage and counterparty risk that dwarfs the real economy and functions as the primary mechanism for wealth extraction from ordinary citizens. These financial instruments create artificial claims on wealth that exceed global GDP by multiple times, enabling banks and financial institutions to generate enormous profits through complex trading strategies while imposing systemic risk on the entire economy. When derivatives contracts unwind during crisis periods, the losses inevitably fall on taxpayers and savers, while the profits from successful trades enrich the financial elite who designed and control these markets. This system operates as a sophisticated wealth transfer mechanism that makes Roman coin clipping appear primitive by comparison. Commercial real estate maturity cliffs, regional bank vulnerabilities, and non-deposit financial institutions all indicate that the same leverage and extraction mechanisms that characterize every pre-collapse monetary system are currently active throughout the American economy. Banks hold derivatives, contracts worth multiples of their actual capital, meaning the system depends on hidden leverage and counterparty promises rather than tangible assets. This structure enables continuous wealth extraction through credit creation, while building systemic fragility that threatens the savings and economic security of ordinary Americans who remain unaware of their exposure to these hidden risks. The disappearance of credible monetary backing has opened the door to unlimited issuance of financial liabilities, derivatives, and promises that extract value from citizens whose savings remain trapped in nominal currency instruments. When central banks engage in heavy gold buying, it signals recognition that the existing reserve currency structure cannot survive indefinitely. But this information remains deliberately obscured from public discourse. The gigantic derivatives market functions as a hidden extraction mechanism that enables financial institutions to generate profits many times their actual capital through complex leverage strategies that ultimately depend on government bailouts and monetary expansion when the system faces stress. Current risks to the United States mirror the vulnerabilities that destroyed previous monetary hegemons, with America holding approximately the same gold reserves it possessed 50 years ago, while potential rivals quietly increase their holdings. The United States remains the world's largest debtor nation, with over $38 trillion in official debt, creating the same fiscal pressures that forced Britain off the gold standard and Rome into monetary debasement. If the dollar loses its reserve dominance through the same historical process that has repeated throughout monetary history, American savers and fixed income holders will face a hidden devaluation event that makes previous currency crises appear minor. The pattern repeats with mathematical precision because the fundamental incentives remain identical, and ordinary citizens must recognize that their savings face systematic extraction through mechanisms deliberately designed to benefit financial elites, while impoverishing those who hold nominal currency assets.